So good morning. Welcome to Clay County's second quarterly luncheon for 2023. We're grateful and appreciate everybody taking the time and energy to be with us this morning and for your support of economic development in Clay County. At this time, I'd like to recognize any elected officials that are in the room. If you would stand up, please. I think we have officials from the Congressman's office. We have county commissioners here. We have the sheriff here. Who am I?
City Council of Green Cove Springs.
Sorry, thank you. City Council, Green Cove Springs. And Ms. Hutchins way in the back over there. So thank you very much, everybody, for taking the time, and we thank you for being here. As you know, these take a good bit of effort. And we appreciate all the support that we get from the Thrasher Horn Conference Center and the staff here to make this such a seamless and smooth event for all of us. So, Bob, thank you for you and all your staff and all you do for supporting us in Clay County. At this time, we would like to recognize our title sponsor, Mr. Rusty. Do you want to come up and give some comments? So Rusty is with Blue Water Marine, and if I was a really great guy, I would tell you to reach under your chair and see if you have the magic ticket for the boat out front. But I think that would make Rusty very nervous if we actually pulled that one off. So, Rusty, thank you for what you're doing, and thank you for taking a minute to sponsor this event.
Sure,
thank
absolutely.
you. The podium is yours.
Thank you. I won't talk long, but I did want to kind of tell you how we got here today. I don't know if you have children or had children, but I have two boys. Their names are Joshua and Caleb. In 2007, they're a lot older now. In 2007, one was going in the Navy and the other one was going into college. And I realized for that split second that I'm going to be alone at home with nothing to do. Now, I'm going to have a lot more money because they're leaving, but I am going to have a lot more free time on my hands. And so I thought, what should I do? So at that point, I decided to buy a boat. I drove to Purcell's. I bought a Yamaha jet boat, SX230, and hooked it up to my little Nissan Pathfinder, pulled it everywhere in Florida. I love that boat. It went everywhere I could go and had an incredible time. Well, as time goes on, I decide that I want to spend a little more time with my boys, especially before they go. And that summer, it was Father's Day, and they said, Dad, what do you want for Father's Day? I go, I want you guys to spend the day with me on the water. And we put the boat in at Palaca. We went down the river to Big Lake George, turned right at the end, if you've ever been down there, Salt Springs, and you're going in and the water's perfectly clear. There's birds, there's nature everywhere. And I remember for the first time in my life, looking at those two boys, being on the boat, being out in nature, and going, I should have bought that boat a lot sooner. Because I'd missed most of their childhood of doing things of just like soccer games and running here and running there that we never had time just to spend together. And at that point, I realized that boating had started to change my life. Well, as time moved on, Daniel, my business partner, and I had some ideas about boating. He bought a boat, so we decided to buy a boat rental company at Doctors Lake Marina. Monty Murphy is the guy. Some of you probably know who he is. It was Doc Holliday Boat Rentals back then, right? So we bought this. Those were terrible boats that we bought. And we started renting these boats. Felt bad. I apologized every time someone got on one. And it was like, oh, we're so sorry. The boat's really kind of bad. But we started developing and building out this business. And after a few years of doing the boat rental business, we both still had full-time jobs. We went up to Jacksonville Marine, and there was another marine industry there called Cruise and Two Marine. And Jim Cruz was the guy who owned the place, and we told him we'd like to rent just an office right up front. And Jim Cruz goes, I don't want you to rent the office, I want you to buy the whole thing. We don't want to buy the whole thing. That's not in our wheelhouse of what we know how to do or what we're going to do. He goes, no, really, I want you to buy the whole thing. So we thought about it for a while. He wanted, actually at the time, $140,000 for the whole business. He didn't have a lot, but so probably overpaid, but I convinced some bankers at 1-to-1 to invest in us, right? And they did. And we ended up buying the business. And I remember Daniel and I having this conversation at the time going, how hard can it be? And that was kind of an understatement. There were so many things we did not know about floor plan and interest. They didn't have boat lines at the time. So we learned through the School of Hard Knocks of kind of building it. Over time, the boating has taken over and become a passion. And the passion is because if you've never seen Florida from the water, you've never seen Florida. Florida is an absolutely gorgeous state with so many waterways and so many beautiful plants and wildlife that just going down the St. Johns River 100 miles or so down that way, passing Rodman Reservoir, seeing all this beautiful place that we live in, the state of Florida, then you see it differently. Also from the boat, you have this opportunity to spend time with family and make memories. And so it's not about selling a boat when we're talking to you about boating. It's about selling a lifestyle that we want to see you have a change in your life because you're experiencing things that you hadn't experienced before. That's what boating is about to us. From that time on, we went ahead to make Jacksonville Marine. We recently have Blue Water Marine, which is on 295 and 17 near Cracker Barrel, and we have a Blue Water Marine in Daytona. We sell Barletta, we sell Bennington, we sell Chris Craft, we sell Stingray, we sell Sailfish and Cobalt. We have a lot of different boats for a lot of different people, but our only concern is you get the right boat. The boat you see out front, that's my boat. I brought it here. So I would say you can't buy it, but we all know better than that. I can always get another one. But thank you for letting us be a sponsor. Thank you for letting us be here, and I appreciate the time.
No, thank you.
Thank you.
So Rusty, I will give a attaboy to that. My daughter's formative high school years, we lived on a lake with a ski boat. And so I tell everybody it was expensive, I'm not gonna lie. I knew where she was, who she was with, and what she was doing throughout high school. And I thought that was a great investment. So the kids still talk about the stories of Dad trying to kill them on the tube. So at this time, so I'd like to ask Sheriff Michelle Cook if she would come up and lead us in the pledge. Following the pledge, we will have the invocation, and then we will start serving by the front tables, working back. It is a buffet, so once we've done the invocation, if you guys will lead out for the table.
Please stand and join me in the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Let's pray. Well, Father, we just thank you for the day. We thank you for the opportunities before us, Lord God. We thank you for your grace and your mercy in our lives, God. We thank you for what you're doing in us and through us and what you're doing for Clay County, Lord God. We thank you for this food and this fellowship and this time. In Jesus' name, amen. So real quickly, I would like to recognize a couple of more folks. Mark Litton is here from Putnam County as one of our regional economic development partners. Where'd Mark go? Mark, raise a hand. Mark's got a hand. Anna, is Anna still here? There's Anna. So Anna Levich with Jack's USA. So thank you guys for coming and supporting what we're doing here in Clay. So look, a few little fun facts real quick, so to speak, fun facts. Most of you are probably aware or probably heard that IKO, what we called Project Gator for about 18 years, is finally announced, and they have bought a site up on, I'm thinking 218 and 301, so it took me a minute to get my numbers correct. So it actually is a extremely large project. It's a $270 million capital investment into Clay County. They are a roofing manufacturer, as you can see. Roofing, they make shingles primarily for residential. They make the underlayment that goes up under the shingles, and they also make a insulation board. Think of a piece of plywood, but it's insulation. It's compressed insulation, typically used in commercial environments. So they will start the shingle portion of the manufacturing facility. Probably will be moving dirt the end of this year, Q3, Q4. They will start that facility. 6 to 9 months later, they will start the second facility, which will be the underlayment facility. And then 6 to 9 months after that, they will start the insulation board facility. So expect a lot of construction out in that area for the next 3 years. As they're building out those operations, they will become active. This facility will support all the shingle sales in the Southeast U.S. So it'll be a big operation. As it says, over 100 jobs. They'll pay north of I think right around 60,000 will be an average wage plus full benefits. We think, as historically most projects want to underestimate what they will be committing to. So we actually expect the 270 million to increase as life develops out. And we also anticipate, as Niagara did, that they'll end up north of 150 employees once they're at full capacity. So great location, great project. We appreciate all the help from our partners. Jax USA and the county staff was incredibly instrumental in moving this forward, and the elected officials with the county were very supportive. So we greatly appreciate all the help. It takes a team to make these projects happen. Conversely to what most people say, hey, it just happens, nothing just happens. So that's a great project. So we're excited about that. And with that, since the starting of Clay County Economic Development Corporation, that brings us up to over $1 billion of capital investment that has been made in Clay County on projects that we have been involved with, and we expect to see that number continue to grow. So it's great. Thank you. All right, fun facts. Unemployment rate, here's the good side. Unemployment rate in Clay County is 2.2%. So the workforce guys said, look, we'll help you on all the projects we can as long as you don't need employees. So other than that, we're good to go. When I was in college and school back in the day, they used to tell us 4% was a full employment. And now across the country, we're sub 3%. So I think it's a dynamic that will be changing how companies look to move forward. We are all aware of McDonald's, and they're putting kiosk out there, and you pretty much self-serve. Everything else is. So companies have to be more efficient to be competitive, and the workforce has to be more efficient in their skills as far as running the equipment that runs the operations. So we were at 2.2, the region's at 2.3%, the country is at 3.1% for unemployment rates. Labor force in Clay County is a little over 116,000 workers. Median home prices in Clay are currently $310,995, median home price, which is a slight decline from $320,000 the previous month. So as we all know, the housing market's starting to fluctuate a little bit with the interest rates keep bouncing up. So those are your fun facts. I will not ask you any questions from that. So at this time, I would like to introduce our keynote speaker. I was trying to think. So retired Air Force Major General Chad Franks will be joining us to speak today. General Franks retired from the Air Force, and I'm going to read a lot of this, which I don't like to do, but I think he has an impressive resume that I want you to be aware of. He did tell me if it was all true, he'd like it too, but so we'll read through this. So General Franks was with the Air Force for 31 years. He culminated his career as Commander, 5th Air Force, Shaw Air Force Base, South Carolina. General Franks was responsible for organizing, training, and equipping 13 wings and 3 direct reporting units in Air Combat Command, ensuring operational readiness for over 800 aircraft and 47,000 airmen under him. General Franks was commissioned in 1990 as a graduate of the University of New Orleans Air Force ROTC program. He has served in a variety of flying positions during assignments in Air Force Special Operations Command, Air Education and Training Command, and Air Combat Command. General Franks is a decorated command pilot with more than 3,200 hours in helicopters. He's got a list of them here, including combat hours in Europe and Southwest Asia. General Franks has served in many high-profile positions, including Chief of Staff for the Combined Air Forces Air Component Commander in Southwest Asia, Senior Executive Officer of the Air Force Vice Chief of Staff, Vice Commander, 14th Air Force and Air Force Space Command, and as Deputy Commanding General for Operations and Intelligence. Operation Inherent Resolve in Baghdad, Iraq. He has commanded at the numbered Air Force level from the wing, the group, and the squadron areas. He has deployed in support of operations provide comfort, Northern Watch, Allied Force, Iraqi Freedom, and Inherent Resolve. General Frank's area of expertise includes operations, strategic development, risk management, team building, leading large organizations, and change management. He was awarded a master's in strategy studies from the U.S. Army War College, as well as a master's in military operational art and science from the U.S. Air Force Air Command and Staff College. In addition to that, he was actually married and has 2 children involved in all that. So he and his wife Kim have been married for over 32 years. They now reside in Monument, Colorado. They have a son and daughter-in-law that recently moved from Valdosta to Tampa, where he is receiving more education as a nurse anesthetist. So from an ICU nurse. Their youngest son, Tyler, also lives in Denver and works for a nationally known company. General Franks is a leader among leaders that other men want to follow. He sets the example and expects others to keep up. He has the ability to take a good group and make it better. He takes the old adage, walk softly and fly a well-appointed combat-ready helicopter to the next level. So with that, I would like to introduce my friend, General Franks.
Hey, thanks everybody for having me today. I really appreciate it. Before I get started, I always like to, we have any active, reserve, National Guard, military members in the audience? Any retirees, veterans? I see we got police, fire, medical. I just want to say thanks. Thanks for serving our country. Thanks for serving our communities. We owe you a lot, and we don't give you enough credit. So let's give them a round of applause for their service. I'm excited to be here today. Now remember, I'm retired, so it doesn't take much to get me excited anymore. But I am excited to be here today, and I'm glad to see that you all are talking about leadership. And that's what I'm going to talk to you today about, because I think it's extremely important. I firmly believe that we live in the greatest nation on the planet. And I believe that because I've been all over this world and I've been in a lot of different countries. And there is no place like the United States, nowhere that I have found. And I firmly believe that we've gotten to this point because of leadership. If you think about when our country started, our founding fathers, when they broke away from Great Britain and decided that they were going to create a government that the world had never seen before, a new experiment. It was their vision and their leadership that kicked this whole thing off. And then you fast forward to President Lincoln, U.S. Grant, when the Union was in trouble. We weren't sure if we were going to survive as a United States anymore. Slavery was tearing us apart. It was Lincoln's vision, Grant's vision for the war. We freed the slaves and we kept the Union together. And the experiment continued on. And then Franklin D. Roosevelt, the Great Depression happens. Everyone around the world said capitalism is not going to work. They're proving it in America. And he had the vision to get us through that. And then immediately following that, World War II, when fascism was on the move. And it was his leadership that brought the United States through that whole thing. John F. Kennedy, his vision to go to the moon, he challenged the nation that we were going to beat the Soviets to the moon, and we did. And look at all the good and the technology that came out of that vision and that leadership. Dr. Martin Luther King and his vision for civil rights transitioned us, made us a different country. And then Reagan and Bush against the Soviet Union, and we brought down the wall. And then you think about on the business side, all the giants that have brought not only technology, but they brought the leadership with it to make us the nation that we are today. The Fords, the Gates, the Jobs, even the Elon Musk of today that have these incredible visions. That's what has made us the nation that we are today. And it's about leadership. And then, really, it gets down to what you're doing here at our local communities across this nation that has made us today just an incredible place to live. And so I credit all of you for taking the time to continue to talk about leadership and how we do things. So I retired a couple years ago. I joined a group. It's me and 3 other retired 2-star generals, and we decided we were going to write a book. And I think all of you have copies of it on your table. I'm going to tell you right now, I think I'd get 25 cents for royalties on this book. So my wife figured out I got to sell like 1 billion of these things to make any money. So we really didn't write it to make money. We wrote it because we're passionate about leadership. Between the 4 of us, we have about 130 years of leadership experience in the military, leading at all different levels, from small units all the way up to large organizations. And so that's why we wrote it. And I want to give you a perfect example of good leadership. When you can write a book with a C-130 pilot and not 1, but 2 fighter pilots and get them to put a helicopter on the front of that book, that's leadership right there at its finest. So I take credit for that. But the group before me had written a book. It was called Leadership at 30,000 Feet. And it was basically talking about large attributes of leadership. And we decided that we wanted to write a different book. We called it Leadership at 100 Feet because it's different. When you get up 30,000 feet, turn the autopilot on, and you just cruise along and you monitor things. When you fly at 100 feet, whether you're flying at 500 miles an hour or 150 miles an hour in a helicopter, things are different. You got to be hands-on. You got to be watching for obstacles all the time. You got to work as a team to make sure you don't run into the ground. And so that's why we wrote this book. And in this book, you'll find lessons that we've learned over our times that will help you in day-to-day leadership scenarios, is basically why we wrote it. I hope you get a chance to read it, and I hope you grab a few nuggets out of it. Leadership is a learning experience. We continue to learn. If you can ever just grab 1 or 2 things, I think it benefits all of us. So I thought today I'd talk to you a little bit about our leadership, what's worked for me in leadership over my 30-plus years in the military. Someone asked me earlier, does it translate to business? I think it does, because I think leadership is leadership no matter where you're leading, whether it's in the civilian community or in the military. And so this talk I used to give to all of my commanders. I had 13 wing commanders. A wing commander has anywhere from 3,000 to maybe 5,000 airmen that they lead. And they reported directly to me. And so I used to sit them down and kind of give them some expectations and talk to them about leadership and the things that's worked for me in the past. So I thought I'd share that with you. And this can be interactive. If you got a question, please raise your hand, or if you think I'm speaking untruth, you can do that as well. The first thing I always talk to them about is you got to know. You got to know your job. You got to know your people, and you got to know yourself. Knowing your job is about credibility. If you're credible, they'll follow you. When I was a commander in the Air Force, every unit that I was in, I maintained my currency as a pilot, even when I was a 2-star general, because I wanted to make sure my airmen knew that I brought credibility to all the decisions that were being made. And if you're credible, they will follow you. And it's easier to get them to think the way you want them to think, because that's what leadership's about. It's about getting other people to do what you want. I used to put that on my slide when I met people, was the definition of leadership is getting everybody to do what I want. And they would laugh, but it's really kind of true. That's what leaders do. So you got to know your job. You got to bring that credibility. You got to know your people. This is probably the most important thing I think that I talk to commanders about and leaders about, is knowing your people. You got to know what motivates them, because not everybody's motivated the same. You got to know what's going on in their lives. You got to know what their goals are so that you can help them reach their potential. I call it intrusive leadership. It's both knowing what they are doing at work and also what they're doing in their private lives. And people get a little uneasy when you start talking about getting involved in their personal life. But I think it's crucial. I'll give you an example. For over 20 years, we were on what we call the one-to-one dwell in the combat rescue community, which is deploy for 6 months, come home for 6 months, deploy for 6 months, come home for 6 months. We did that for 20 years. In that 20 years, in our community, we had 0 suicides when we were deployed. 0. Back at home station, that was a different story. Unfortunately, we had many. And we figured out, well, because when we're deployed, it's forced intrusive leadership. When we're deployed, we work 14 to 16 hours a day together. We eat every meal together. 4. Breakfast, lunch, dinner, and midnight chow. And then we all sleep. We don't sleep together. We sleep in the same facility. Either the same facility or the same tent. So immediately, if someone got a bad news from home, we all knew about it because we were sitting right there with them. You know, if the spouse sends a note, says the wash machine's broken, kids are acting up at school, and the car just quit, we knew immediately, we could immediately roll in and help. But when we got back home, it was completely different. Go to work, 5 o'clock comes, we all hit the gate, and everybody goes their separate ways, and that was the end of it. So we figured out you got to have that intrusive leadership all the time, because if you can help your subordinates with even their personal life, that means they are more focused when they come to work, which means the team is better. And ultimately, that's what we're trying to do as leaders. And you got to know yourself. Sometimes you got to sit and do a little analysis of your own leadership skills, what you're good at and what you're not good at. I was not a detailed person. I hate getting into the details. So I knew that I had to surround myself with those kind of people that did get in those details. I either had a deputy commander or a chief of staff that would just dive into the details and they knew it. But you got to know yourself, and you can't ever stop learning, like we talked about in the beginning. You got to keep reading about leadership. You got to keep viewing other people, picking up little tricks and trades, and always getting better in your leadership skills. So you got to know your job, you got to know your people, and you got to know yourself as well. The next one is, and that goes into what I was talking about, knowing your people, because ultimately as a leader, we're in the people business. And you got to understand that. No matter what you do, whether you're in finance or government or in the military, it really doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what your mission is or what your goal is or what your task is. Ultimately, it's about the people that are going to get that done. We used to say in Air Combat Command, people first, mission always, because we knew that if we took care of our airmen and their families, because we realized that if the families are not happy, guess what? The individual is not 100% when they're there at work. And so we always made sure that our commanders understood and realized that they were in the people business. I used to sit down with all the commanders when they took over a new unit or a new organization, and we would discuss, expectations and those kind of things. And the question I would always get from a new commander is, so, hey, sir, what do I need to do to be successful for you? And I would tell them immediately, that's the wrong question, because you're focused on success, and you shouldn't be. You should be focused on being significant to the people that you lead, and that makes a difference. Coach Lou Holtz, he was a coach at Notre Dame, won a national championship, and he used to say that the difference between being significant and being successful is that when you leave the organization, your success is over with. But if you're significant, your success goes on long after you're gone. And I think he's right. So how do you be significant? Well, being a good military person, you got to have an acronym for everything. So you just got to care. C-A-R-E. You got to care. You got to communicate. You got to communicate with your subordinates. You got to tell them, what are those things that helped you get to where you are today? What was successful for you to get you to that point? But you also got to tell them the things that you failed at. And I think that's just as crucial. A lot of leaders are uneasy doing that. I had a lot of failures, so I had a lot to pick from. But I had no problem telling them that because that would help them as they were on their journey. And you got to communicate with them about what are their goals. What can you do to help them reach their potential so that they can be better? So you got to communicate. You got to be active. You got to get out. You can't do all this through email or sit behind a computer. And you got to go see them where they work. Not where you work, but see them where they work. You got to remember that they don't care who you are. They care that you know who they are. And that makes a huge difference. So you got to get out and about, and you got to go see them. And I think they'll appreciate that. And then you got to respect all of them. And you got to realize they all have a different story. They all come from a different background. We talk a lot these days about diversity, and people get upset when we start talking about diversity. But I would say we've always had diversity, because not everybody comes from the same place. Different genders, different colors, different religion, different upbringings. Some come from affluent families, some come from families with one parent. And they all bring a different perspective. And as a leader, you need that, and you should value that. And that's why I say I think we've had it for a long time. I had, members of my unit that grew up in New York City, and I came from Louisiana. We were completely different. But we brought different perspectives, and we learned a lot from each other. And we made the team better. And we made our commander better because we gave him different views. And so you have to respect all of those different points of view. And then E, you got to encourage them. You have to be encouraging. And encourage them to figure out what it is that makes them whole and what their potential could be, and then help them go do that. And be encouraging. We used to have a lot of commanders that walk around. They would work like 20 hours a day. I don't know what they were doing. And they always looked beat down and worn out. And I'm like, hey, nobody wants to be you if you walk around looking like that all the time. I mean, why would I want to be a commander if that's all you do is work and you have no family time and you're always disgruntled? You got to be happy. You got to encourage them and be enthusiastic. So you want to be a significant leader, not just focus on success. Any Pittsburgh Steelers fans in here? We got one that will admit it. Just kidding. They won four out of 5 Super Bowl championships in the 70s. 70s and 80s. Chuck Noll was their coach. And a reporter asked Chuck one time, he said, hey, Coach, how can you sustain such a high level with this team? And his reply was, look, champions aren't champions because they do extraordinary things. Champions are champions because they do the ordinary things better than anybody else. And basically what he was saying was, you got to be good at the fundamentals. General Mattis used to tell us, be brilliant at the basics. There's several ways to say it. But I used to tell my airmen, I just want you to come to work every single day and do the ordinary things better than anybody else. And if we do that, we'll continue to be outstanding. So it doesn't take an extraordinary effort. And I think your subordinates will appreciate the fact that that's not required. It's required to come in and be very, very good at the basic of your job. That they can relate to. We have a lot of leaders, we had a lot of commanders in the Air Force that would try to demand something that was just too far to reach. But when you break it down to fundamentals and be good at that, then your team is going to be successful. Work for the Pittsburgh Steelers. That's good enough for me. So they got to do the ordinary things better than anyone else. We talk about, I used to talk to my commanders again, in the military, we don't make money. We just spend all your money. It's what we do. And we would just get handed a budget, and it was never enough. I mean, and you're probably all in the same boat. No matter what you do, what field you're in, you probably don't have all the resources that you need to get done what you want to get done. But I used to tell all my commanders, look, you need to advocate for your subordinates and for your organization, but you can't complain. Because then your unit, your organization takes on that culture of, well, all we do is complain because, oh, woe is us. We don't have this, we don't have that. It's okay to advocate to your superiors, I need this and this and this, but it's not okay to complain, especially to your subordinates. You just got to get after it. I think it was Theodore Roosevelt said, do what you can with what you got where you're at. And that's the culture you want to set in your organization, I think, to make sure that people will just get after it every day. And we don't get into this mindset of, well, we can't do this because we don't have the resources that we need. They got to get on with it. So you got to advocate, but don't complain. As a leader, I think it's very important that you fight for feedback. A lot of people aren't easy with getting feedback, and they're not receptive to it. And I think that's the wrong attitude. A good team wants to be told they're good. A great team wants to be told how they can get better. And so, first, you got to be receptive to that feedback, and then you got to ask for it. If you're not getting anything, if you're not being told anything, then you're missing something. And that something is that opportunity to get better, either as a leader yourself or as an organization. So you got to fight for that feedback. You know, in the military, we love to do inspections. And every commander hates that because they get graded. I'm like, it's an opportunity to get better. They're going to come in and tell you where you have holes, where you're missing things. And in the process, you're going to get better. So fight for that. Fight for that. Invite people from outside your organization to come in and just take a look. It'll deliver results. And then I used to tell my airmen that I would talk about perfection. A lot of people would get on easy when I talked about perfection because nobody's perfect. We all know that. So Vince Lombardi, another outstanding NFL coach, Green Bay Packers. Green Bay Packers were the worst team in football when he took over. And the first meeting he had with his team, he stood in front of them and he said, gentlemen, we are going to relentlessly pursue perfection, knowing that we'll never attain it. But we're going to relentlessly pursue perfection, and in the process, we're going to attain excellence. And I think that's spot on. That's telling your organization that we are going to continually try to get better. We're not going to settle. We will never be perfect. Nobody is, no organization is, no team is. But we're going to constantly chase it. And we'll probably be pretty damn good in the process. And I think that paid a lot of dividends for us. The leader's job is to build teams. And you should look within your organization and figure out there's the whole team and then there's teams within the team, right? I mean, when I was a commander, there was always me and there was a deputy commander and I had my senior enlisted advisor and we were a team at the top. But then I had subordinate commanders that I needed to be teams, work together. And then even below them, there were other teams within their organizations that had to come together and work to get after the mission. And so you got to establish this culture of teamwork. When you have somebody that's not being a good teammate, there's one of two things that you can do, in my opinion. You can coach them up, you can mentor them, you can show them how to be a good teammate. If they don't get it, then you got to get rid of them. And you got to move on because it hurts everybody else. Good teams have good players. Great teams have good teammates. And that makes a huge difference in an organization, in my opinion. And then finally, for those of us in leadership positions, you got to remember that you're not indispensable. No one is. For every one of you that's in a leadership positions, there's probably 3 or 4 other people that could probably do the same job and do it just as good. You're not indispensable. President Lincoln used to go down to the telegraph office, and that's where he would monitor the war. He could get telegrams from all his commanders. He could see what was going on. So he was in the telegraph office one night. It was just him and the telegraph operator. And they get a cable that says the Confederates have just taken one of the Union camps. And they've taken 100 horses and 1 brigadier general officer. And the telegraph operator hears President Lincoln go, "Oh, man, I hate to lose 100 horses." And he looks at the president and he's like, "But sir, did you not hear when I said that they took a general officer?" He's like, "Yeah, I can make a general officer in 5 minutes. You know how long it takes me to get 100 horses?" So nobody's indispensable. You got to be humble. I used to tell them, carry your own bags. When you start believing your own press, that's trouble. Most of our commanders that got in trouble because they started believing their own press, and they thought they were all that, and they needed to be humble. And the ones that did normally did pretty well and served their subordinates pretty good. So those are kind of my leadership principles that I've used over the 30-plus years I was in the military. Worked for me. I used to share them with all my commanders. I'll leave you with one last quote, again from Lou Holtz. When he took over as the head football coach at Notre Dame, the president wrote him a note, left it on his desk in his office so that when he got there on his first day, it said, "Lou, I can name you the head coach, but I can't name you the leader. Titles come from above, but leaders are selected by those under you. But if you give them a vision and a plan, they'll follow you." So that's what I'll leave you with. I thank you for letting me talk to you today. Hopefully you get 1 or 2 nuggets out of that. And again, I appreciate the fact that you're talking about this. I wish you all well here in Clay County. I'll be watching from afar in Colorado, where it's a little bit colder than here in Florida. We might have time for a few questions. Yeah.
You mentioned earlier the difference between physical courage and moral.
Yeah. Yeah.
Can you impart a little bit of that? Because
Yeah. We were talking beforehand. One of my things that I tell commanders as well and leaders is that you got to demonstrate courage. That's both physical and moral courage. As Americans, I think you all will be happy to know that in the over 30 years that I spent in the military, and I spent a lot of time in combat, not once did I ever see anyone lack the physical courage. My sons and daughters that you all send to the military are just incredible human beings. They've never lacked the physical courage. Moral courage is a different story. And that's where a lot of people fail, because it's much harder to do. It means speaking truth to power. It means having the courage to stand up and disagree with someone, especially your boss, if you think that they're wrong. And not just to do it in private, sometimes you got to do it in public. And to do the right things. Now, obviously, we all know that there's a time for discussion, for disagreement, and then once the boss says, this is what we're doing, we're moving out, as long as it's not immoral or unethical, then you move out. But we got to have leaders that are willing to stand up and voice their opinions, because it actually makes everybody better, and it makes that commander better. Everybody sitting around the table agreeing with me is probably not going to do us any good. So that's what I talk about. You got to have that moral courage to stand up when necessary. Now, you got to pick your battles, obviously. But I think good leaders will do that. And you do that in public so that you show everyone else that it's okay. And I think a good leader will be receptive to that and not just talk somebody down because they disagree with the commander. That's the worst thing you could probably do when you're sitting in a meeting or something and somebody says, hey, sir, I don't think that's a good idea. And then you just lop their head off right there in front of everybody. You're not going to get any more disagreements. So I used to challenge my staff when we would have meetings that if they were all agreeing with me, I'd look at them and go, I think y'all are all wrong because I think I'm wrong. And nobody's speaking up or saying anything. So you want to try to foster that culture. Thanks for that question. Anybody else? Any questions for me?
I've got a lighthearted question.
Yep.
Where did Sparky come from? Tell us the story.
So when I was a lot younger looking than that, I went on my first deployment to Turkey. We were in doing Operation Northern Watch, and the unit that I had been in, they were a pretty veteran unit. I was the first new guy they had in like 4 years. So they had been deploying on a regular basis, and then I was going, and I was excited. I was fired up to go, and they were like, yeah, whatever, you know. And I kept telling them how much fun we were going to have and all that kind of stuff. And if you remember the movie Vacation, when he took them all to Wally World, well, his wife called him Sparky. And so one night we're sitting around watching that movie on appointment, and they're like, dude, you're Sparky from now on, because we're tired of hearing about how much fun we're going to have on this deployment.
I was hoping for something a little more colorful.
Yeah.
Dragging the tail of the helicopter.
If it was more colorful, I wouldn't have told you anyway. But fortunately, that's all it was. It was nothing that exciting. So, anyone else? I don't want to keep y'all. Yeah.
Joe, can you tell us one of your most harrowing experiences, one to where you just felt like the end was near, and kind of describe that to us, and then what you learned from it?
Yeah. Let's see. What did I learn from it? So, again, I was a young aviator, and we were working with the SEALs out on the East Coast, and I was with a pretty experienced pilot. I was co-pilot at the time, and we flew over to pick up. We had to go pick up the SEALs, and then we had to go take them out to the ship. And we were supposed to pick up like 4 of these guys. And we land on the pad, and about 11 of them get on with all their stuff. And they bring a lot of stuff. And I had to take off out of this pad, and there was a huge tower right on the other side. And so I took off, and horns started going off, warnings started going off. I was pulling too much power, starting to droop the rotor, and nobody was saying anything. And I cleared that tower by about 5 feet. They picked up their legs as we went over it. And then I got on the other side, and I pushed over and got some airspeed. And I was livid. I was so mad because nobody had said anything. I mean, we had an instructor pilot, and I had 2 very experienced, a flight engineer and a gunner in the back. And they didn't speak up. They didn't say anything. They didn't help me. I mean, I was screwing it up. It was my fault. But we had a really serious conversation after that about, hey, it doesn't matter what your rank is or who you are when you're up front. We're all in this together. And if you see somebody doing something stupid like I was doing, you need to voice your opinion and you need to speak up. Because I'm like, I'd have hit that tower first, but y'all were right behind me. And we would have all packed it in. And so I learned a lot from that as a young aviator. And something that I brought with me the rest of the time while I was flying. So that's one that sticks out in my mind. And my commander was actually standing on the pad and watched me do that whole thing. And he said, well, yeah, the good thing is you survived it, so you learned a good lesson.
Thanks, Joe.
I'm like, hey, thanks, appreciate it. Thank you.
Anybody else?
Anybody else? Okay, hey, thanks, appreciate it.
So I'm assuming everybody realized there was a book in your seat, so that is your homework for this week. It's really an easy read. It's really an interesting book. I think you'll be encouraged if you go through it, and you'll be able to point out a few things. But we thought that would be neat to have a speaker and provide a book to everybody in attendance for that. There should be some extras. If there's somebody in your office, you can always say, you need to read this, and hand them a book on leadership. So there are a couple of extras if you need a few books to round out the staff. At this time, I would like to say thank you to a special person that has helped this event for so many years, Miss Ellen Hare, if you will join us up here. So Ellen has been with Conference Center Operations Manager. She has hosted our quarterly luncheon since the beginning, and she will be leaving to enjoy a retirement. And we wanted to say thank you so much for all you have done for us. So thank you. So thank you. Oh, let's see where we're at. We're almost there, guys. So thank you to Laura for doing a great job, as she always does, the event. We also, and I typically don't do this, but I wanted to say thank you to my board members that are here. So if the board members will raise their hand. We've got a great board. We appreciate your time and energy. So we do appreciate the direction and support we get. You guys do a lot of things behind the scenes that nobody ever knows about, but you make a difference in this community. So thank you for what you were doing. With that, thank you all for joining us here. I think Rusty has a boat outside that he would sell. So for our investment partners, if you got cool stuff, let us know. So eventually we'll have a raffle for something. So with that, I want to say thank each of you for coming today. Special thanks to Chad for coming and speaking today. We greatly appreciate your time and energy. It was great to have you, sir. And with that, we are adjourned. Have a great summer, and we will see you in the fall.